Hello, everybody, and welcome to Unliving the Lie, where we talk about all things narcissist and we delve deep into the insidiousness of narcissistic abuse, sociopathic abuse, and domestic violence. I'm your host here on Unliving the Lie, Candace Renee Moon. I'm a trauma recovery coach and I'm a domestic violence survivor. Today, we're going to talk about trauma bonding. How do you know you're trauma bonding? What is a trauma bond? What is cognitive dissonance? Why is it when victim shamers say, oh, you should just leave, it's so painful and so hurtful, and why victims can't leave? And saying those kinds of things to people is just perpetuating their shame. When I was in a relationship, sorry, I clicked something with my abuser. I wanted to leave within 6 months of the relationship. And I actually tried to talk to him about it. Even though I struggle with codependency, it was hard for me to just come out and say, get out of my house. Because of my codependency and because of my fear of conflict, I wasn't as firm as I could have been. I wish that I would have been. But I told him, I said, I'm just not sure about this relationship. I'm not sure what I want. I need time to think. Because I had left and gone to a friend's and he was in a rage. He was in an absolute rage over the fact that I left and went to a friend's and didn't tell him or ask his permission, and I wasn't coming right home, and I had to come right home. I'd already learned that his rages were toxic and scary. I didn't want to deal with his rages. And again, as a codependent person, I hated conflict. It terrified me. So I came home, I hurried home, and he was able to bully me into allowing him to stay. Because you see, what kind of healthy person would want to force a woman to be with them, knowing that this woman has doubts and needs time to think? And knowing that you did some really awful things to her already in these 6 months, and you should just leave, right? A healthy man would have just left and understood and been like, okay, I'm going to find somewhere else to go. Because he was, in essence, homeless. He was homeless. And that's why I took him in. He was a homeless drug addict. His family didn't want to take him in. He needed a place to live. So he didn't really love me or want a relationship with me. He needed a place to stay. He needed his front. He needed the world to see him as an upstanding person. You see, every woman that he's been with, had been with in the past, he needed them to take care of him and to give him that false front that all narcissists want. They want that false front. They want that, like, oh, the world is seeing me as this fantastic person and I need to keep you and I own you and how dare you discard me. It was basically, for the rest of our relationship, he punished me and abused me for that incident of discarding him, wanting to discard him, wanting to break up with him, not being enamored by him and falling for him. I talk about this at great length. If you go check out my podcast on Living the Lie, I'm on Amazon Music, I'm on Spotify, I'm on iTunes, Podbean, iHeartRadio, and there's a couple others I can't think, but I give my story in great detail about why I didn't go. I was already trauma bonded. I just didn't know that. The trauma bond is the reward and the punishment. You see, my abuser for the first couple months really love bombed me and really sucked me in and got me hooked. No one had ever spoken this way to me and told me how fantastic I was and pulled me in, and he played upon my conscientious nature. He played upon my good nature and my innocence, the fact that I always saw the good in people and I wanted to help people. He played upon that because he played up that he was this, troubled soul that just needed someone to help him get off drugs and be a good man. And when that facade started to crack, I wanted to get away. I knew this was a bad, toxic relationship, and I knew he was not what he pretended to be in the beginning. I knew this had been a big mistake, but I didn't leave for 2 more years. 2 more years I was stuck in this sick, abusive relationship. So when you try to leave. So how do you know you're trauma bonded? There's a lot of different ways to know you're trauma bonded. And I'm going to talk about a couple of them. One is you really know you need to leave. You try to break up with them, but something always happens where you end up staying. Either the abuser threatens you or convinces you and starts to love bomb you again, and you're confused and you start to fall for it. So it's like that feeling inside your body where you know you need to, you know you don't even love this person, you know you don't even like this person. Their personality, their gaslighting, the way they're so rude and critical to you, you know this is unhealthy and you know you deserve better. No one has ever criticized you to this extent. You've never been so blamed for every single thing in the relationship, and you know it's toxic and it makes you feel like shit every day, and you're constantly trying to think, maybe it is me. Is there something I'm doing wrong? No one has ever treated me this way before, or my mom used to treat me this way. Maybe it's normal, but I don't like it. And you know this. But then they'll come in and they'll do something. They'll do the one little thing to kind of love bomb you, and then you're hooked. You're like, oh, but that day we went out to the island and we drank wine and went to the lighthouse, and it was just so lovely and so beautiful. He was so kind and so nice. Like, you'll fixate on that one little thing, and then the next day when you get home, he'll wake up in the morning screaming at you and raging at you because you forgot to remind him to pick up his cigarettes the night before. So they'll do these things to you, and so that you were so love bombed and so excited about your little day trip, and then the next morning he's screaming at you like a psycho monster, and the cycle continues. That is how the trauma bonding starts. Because you see, your body is producing chemicals. There's not anything you're doing. There's no weakness within you that makes you a weak person, that you're so pathetic and so weak that you can't just say no. I always prided myself on being a strong-willed person, and I still got trauma bonded. The trauma bond doesn't care if you're a person with high self-esteem and you're a strong-willed person that has never had a narcissist or never had anyone abuse you before, because what's going on is the chemicals in your body. Your body is a brilliant machine that will do things. The body's designed for evolution and adaptation. So what's going on, there's a lot of things going on. When you're in love, you have all the feel-good dopamine, serotonin, all these fantastic feelings just rushing through, and your cortisol levels are really low and you just feel happy. This is with anybody that falls in love, but particularly if you meet the narcissist after, maybe you just went through a divorce, or maybe you just broke up and had a hard breakup, or your husband passed away, like in my case, and I had been with a man for 15 years that struggled with addiction, and he slept on the couch, I slept in my room. I was actually kind of lonely for companionship. Doesn't mean I had low self-esteem, and it doesn't mean I was weak, but it was a vulnerability that I had. And my codependency, making it hard for me to say no to people. I struggled with saying no to people, and I struggled with daddy issues. My father abandoned me, so I had a lot of different issues, but that didn't mean I had low self-esteem or I was weak. But we all have these vulnerabilities. Every single human has vulnerabilities, and narcissists are professionals at playing upon them. So in the love bombing, the narcissist acted like they were the one person that's going to listen to you and be the person of your dreams. And I know this is so fast, Candace, but I really think you're different, and you and I could be really great together, and I just think I'm falling for you. You're just so intriguing. And they say all these things that nobody has ever said to you, because normal people don't do these things in the beginning of a relationship, only knowing someone a few weeks. A normal human being would never say, oh my God, I love you so much, and I don't know you, but I don't know why I love you. I don't know why I think you're my soulmate. That's very toxic. And when you're vulnerable and you have been maybe abused in the past or mistreated, and someone comes along and you don't know the first thing about a narcissist, or maybe your parents were a narcissist but they were always mean and abusive, but you've never been love bombed before. I was never love bombed before, and so maybe you've never been love bombed, and you think, oh my God, you just instantly come under this spell. And if you really think about it, go back to those times when you're being love bombed. Your body was screaming at you that this is too fast. Your body was screaming at you that this is kind of messed up. But you proceeded anyways. You started the trauma bond. And then as soon as the narcissistic person thinks that they've got you, and that will depend upon the narcissist, it will depend upon the situation. They will love bomb you as long as they need to. They may wait till you get married. I have heard stories and know people that the narcissist, on the day, as soon as they said I do, at the end of the reception, they were in the car driving, the narcissist instantly switched and took the mask off and started the devaluation immediately as soon as he got her to marry him. So it just depends on the situation. But when they decide that they've got you, mine was when I allowed him to move into my house. As soon as I allowed him to move into my house, he stopped all love bombing. He started instantly criticizing me chronically, putting me down. You'll have to listen to my podcast. There's many things he did, coercing me into doing sexual things I didn't want to do, forcing me to take drugs, like all kinds of horrific things, and then taking over my home and acting as if he was there to save me. And I'm like, wait a minute, you needed me to let you live here because you're homeless, which is true. He was homeless. He's always been homeless. When I think about it, he's been perpetually homeless since he got discharged from the army. He was in the army and he got discharged for a drug problem. And ever since then, his wife, his two wives left him. I mean, every woman leaves him. He's perpetually been homeless and on the hunt, seeking a place to live, seeking supply, seeking someone to take care of him, seeking a woman to give him supply. So he comes into my house acting as if now he is in charge and I need him, and tried to flip the script. So he immediately stopped love bombing me when I allowed him to move into my house. So there will be a time when they decide they don't have to love bomb you anymore, that they've done enough. And because it's exhausting to be so fake, it's exhausting to mirror a person like that and to copy their every move and to pretend that they have the same values and pretend. And he immediately started stopping and dropping the love bombing and started being mean to me, critical, criticizing, verbally abusive, mentally abusive, trying to then employ his breakdown methods where he was going to break me down and deprogram me from who I was and try to make me into someone else and to crush me. And that's when he started also physically abusing me because I resisted it and I wanted to leave him. And in the minute the love bombing stopped and he started acting this way, I wanted nothing to do with him anymore. But yet, like I said, I stayed for 2 more years. I was chemically addicted to this person. And what happens is, so you're falling in love, you're being love bombed, you get all these amazing hormones and you feel wonderful, but then as soon as the devaluation starts and they start abusing you subtly, your cortisol levels go up. You start to feel stressed. You start to feel upset because sometimes they'll just overtly come right out and start to be mean to you. They might start stonewalling you, silent treatment, criticizing you, putting you down, turning things around. Like they'll start right away. They'll start with the gaslighting. They'll start putting you down. They'll start just being nasty and disgusting. And then your cortisol levels are going to go up. And then what happens is then your body will overcompensate by producing dopamine, over amounts of dopamine. And this is what happens in a drug addict's body. When the drug addict gets their first hit of, let's say, heroin or crack cocaine, and they love it. They're like, oh my gosh, I love that feeling. So when you met the narcissistic abuser, you were instantly like addicted. The love feelings, it's like that person that took that hit of a drug, like, oh wow, I love this feeling, and then suddenly the drug was taken away, suddenly the drug was gone, and then the stress hormones went up, and then the dopamine went to overly compensate, and you're jonesing now for that goodness. That's the trauma bond. That's what happens. So you are fighting chemicals in your body. You're not weak. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing that you did wrong. Your body is producing these chemicals, and your body will produce addictive peptides. And these peptides are neutral. The body is neutral. The peptides just merely respond to extreme emotion. So the peptide's going to respond to extreme happiness, extreme excitement, and it's going to produce that. But then the peptides are also going to produce when it's extreme sadness, betrayal, feelings of depression, anxiety, fear, and it creates the addiction. So then you become on an addictive cycle with that person. I have a class on that. I have an intensive class on my website called Trauma Bond Detox, and I explain in great details how this works. So if you're interested, I will put the link below this video if you're interested in permanently detoxing from the trauma bond and understanding all the chemicals and what goes and is involved in the body and what happens during the abuse and reward in the body. I'll put the link to that below this video. But you become chemically addicted to the person through the abuse and then the love bombing. And it's a cycle. And if you have ever tried to leave a narcissist, you know what I'm talking about. It's hard to leave an abusive relationship. They'll do something horrible and you go, that's it, I'm done. And you'll leave and then they'll come back. And you'll leave and then you'll start to miss them. Your body will start to crave them. There's chemicals that actually release in the body that will cause you to have memories. And it's fascinating what the body will do to relieve itself and to get relief from not being with the person. So you are chemically addicted. And how do you know you're chemically addicted? Well, I covered one where you try to leave but you can't. You always end up going back and it doesn't make any sense. Why do you keep going back? Why do you want to be with this person? You also will start to, when family and friends start to notice the abusive behavior, you will start to rationalize and try to reframe the abuse. You will be stuck in cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is when you have two conflicting ways of being inside. One, you know the abuse is wrong, you know the way you're being treated is wrong, you know it's terrible, but then you're so terrified of rocking the boat, you're terrified of confronting the abuser and telling them that the way they're treating you is wrong, and you want relief because they're going to come and abuse you, and you don't want that to happen because you know if you stand. I learned very quickly when I stood up and confronted my abuser that I was going to be abused even worse. So I knew right away to like, oh, you don't hold him accountable or you're going to get punished. So you refrain from that, but it's also the fear of losing something that you think that you love, giving up, being a quitter, or you're so afraid of everybody judging you and shaming you, like how could you be so stupid? So you want to cover that. Those feelings are so incredibly painful. You don't want to face those feelings that you were being abused. That sometimes is the biggest thing. You don't want to see that you're being abused. I'm not one of those people. I'm not one of those people that is abused. I would never put up with that. That's not me. I'm not being abused. So you start to reframe the abuse. No, he has a drug problem. And if he gets off of his drugs and gets help and is a better man, then things will get better. That's what I did. I blamed everything on the drugs. I'm like, oh, if he could just get off the drugs are making him crazy. If he could just get off the drugs. Well, it was never when he was on the drugs that he abused me. He abused me when he was sober and coming down from the drugs. It wasn't the drugs. You can't blame the drugs or that alcohol for the abuse. Now, maybe your abuser, when he drinks alcohol, he abuses you, and so it's easy for you to say, oh, well, if he would stop drinking, he wouldn't abuse me. But it's a choice. Substance abuse disorder is a separate disorder from narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder. Those are two separate things. And yes, usually they can go hand in hand. I talk about this in my video that I did, substance use coercion. It can go hand in hand, and alcoholics are tricky. You may just be with an addict or you may be with an abuser, but you can't blame the drugs and the alcohol and think, oh, if they get off of it, they'll get better. That's what I did. And when he abused me physically, I would call the police and he'd go to jail, and then I would get the prosecutor and the judge to put him into rehab, hoping that he would be shamed. He would suddenly realize what he was doing was abusive and wrong because he's sitting in jail, and he would be a good man. No, that never ever happened. What happened was he blamed me, called me a snitch, called me all these terrible things, tried to get it all my fault. You did this to be spiteful, to get even with me, and blah blah blah. I didn't abuse you, and tried to brainwash me and gaslight me and tell me he didn't abuse me, he didn't break my finger, he didn't do all these things, even though the police had all the pictures of the bruises all over my body. I had bald spots on the back of my head, my finger was broken, I got surgery. Oh, I didn't do that. They don't change. So they don't take responsibility. A person can only change when they take responsibility. Narcissistic abusers, they don't take responsibility. So it doesn't matter. They're not going to change. So you can fool yourself. You can stay in the cognitive dissonance and think, oh, if only this could happen, they would change. If I could do this, they would change. So if you're doing those things, you are trauma bonded. If you are thinking, oh gosh, if I just really work on myself, if I really try to just be mindful of the way I talk to them, if I really just sit quietly and patiently and just let them talk, if I don't interrupt them anymore, if I just really don't express my opinions, if I don't correct them, if I don't disagree with them, if you're censoring yourself like this to keep them satisfied, you are trauma bonded. It's cognitive dissonance. You are taking it on and blaming yourself and thinking if you just do these things, they'll be nice to you, and then that's okay. And so then you're reframing the abuse like, oh, it's just the drugs, or oh, he had a bad day at work, or he was abused as a child, his family is shit. You know, all these excuses and rationalizations we will come up with to reframe the abuse. If you're doing those things, you're trauma bonded. You are trauma bonded, and there's nothing wrong with you. The only way to break the trauma bond is to finally tell yourself the truth, come out of the cognitive dissonance when you're in that moment of realizing, oh my God, he just like hit me again, or he just did this again, or he raged at me for 5 hours. I can't do this anymore. In that moment, tell yourself the truth. I'm being abused. I am being abused and mistreated, and I'm not going to take it anymore. And you start to make your plans, once you tell the truth, to get out, to get away. The only way to break the trauma bond is to go no contact. That is really the only way to break the trauma bond. It's the same as with a drug addiction. You have to see yourself as a drug addict, junkie, and the narcissist is your drug of choice. And the only way to set yourself free from it is to leave it and never be with it again. Just like an alcoholic, the only way for an alcoholic to sober up and to live a happy life is to never ever touch alcohol again. But it is not that simple to just do it cold turkey on your own. What does an addict need? An addict needs rehab. An addict needs support and help and community and holding themselves accountable, breaking out of their cognitive dissonance, not making excuses for the behavior, not reframing the abuse, not staying trapped in cognitive dissonance, not rationalizing things. This is the same process that you go through to break out of a trauma bond. So if you're doing any of the things that I listed in here, if you're rationalizing, making excuses to friends and family, making excuses to yourself, trying to break up with them over and over and over again, and then you never get any headway, you never actually break up with them, even though that's what you want. Now, my abusive ex would always threaten to break up with me, to try to hurt me and to try to play games with me, and I finally broke up with him when I called his bluff. I had to call his bluff. Like, I still couldn't even bring myself to bring it up. Let's break up. I still was trapped in cognitive dissonance. I was trauma bonded, codependent, all these things. I couldn't even bring it up. I was always just hoping he would just leave and never come back. And finally, he said, I think in one of his little manipulation rages, we need to just break up. This is it. And I said, yeah, let's break up. And I remember seeing his face, like he couldn't believe that I was like, yeah, we need to break up. And I was dead serious. And again, I talk about this in great length in my podcast. My last 2 podcasts are like an hour long, the beginning and then lies and betrayal. It's my story. So if you want to hear my entire story, you can go to my podcast and I'll put the link below. But if you're doing any of these things, you're trauma bonded. And everybody in an abusive relationship, you are trauma bonded to your abuser. You know the behavior is toxic, you know it's wrong, but you're trauma bonded. You're chemically addicted. You're not doing anything wrong. Okay? Don't beat yourself up. You're not doing anything wrong. You're fighting against your body. And even though the outside world, well-meaning friends and family are like maybe telling you you're stupid, they can't believe you're doing this, why would you stay, why would you put up with this, and they're causing you even more shame, and they're abusing you even more than the abuser is abusing you, but they just don't know they're abusing you, you're trauma bonded. There's nothing that you're doing wrong. It takes the average woman 7 times to leave an abusive relationship, and that's just average. Okay, so it doesn't matter if it's your 10th time, As long as that one final time, you'll know when that final time is. Everybody gets to that point with a narcissist where they finally had their time and they're done. And if you're in that place where you're done and you're ready to be done, check out my course. It's a digital course. It's videos and everything. You can listen to it at your own pace. It's a digital course on my website. I will put the link to in the bio here in my YouTube, where you can go check it out. Go to my website. You'll download it. It'll come, if you decide to purchase it, it'll come in like a zip file. But there is a intricate chemical reaction inside the body that happens. It's not anything you're doing wrong. It can happen to anyone. Nobody is above this. Nobody. I don't care who you are. You're not above this. And if you are currently trauma bonded, you're not alone. I can help you with that. I actually also have on my website, if you're struggling with no contact, I have a free PDF on there as well. So if any of these things are happening, you are trauma bonded, but you're not alone, and there is help. So please reach out to me if you need help and you are struggling, that you're not doing anything wrong. All right, thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you relate to this, please subscribe, hit like, share this with anybody that you think could benefit from this. Share, 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 like, and subscribe, and we will talk again soon. Namaste.